So thrilled to call up, leading mobile brands as it pertains to e-commerce and in-store, direct-to-consumer. We have Jess Jacobs, who's Director of Marketing from Wayfarer, as well as Ron Ferris, GM of Nike Digital Studios and Sneakers App. Why don't you come on up? Okay, so thought it would be me introducing you. Is always weird because you know more about you, so I'm going to have you introduce you. If you could just both take a quick minute, introduce yourselves, your roles, and would love to hear outside of the apps you work on, what is your go-to favorite app, either new or just something you can't live without?
Sure. Hi, and thanks for having me. This is fun. So Jess Jacobs, I work at Wayfarer, as Sarah kindly teed up. For those of you not familiar with the brand, Wayfarer is the leading online destination for everything for the home. We have over 10 million products from 10,000 suppliers, so we like to say there's something for every style and budget. Last year we closed 2017 with close to $5 billion in revenue, have 11 million active customers, and sort of most excitingly probably for this room, nearly 50% of our orders actually came through a mobile device. So we've been very aggressive about pursuing a mobile-first agenda for a long time now. And in our category, it means different things, given that a lot of our purchases are highly considered. But it's been one of the fun things that I get to work on. So my team is responsible for driving awareness and consideration of our brands. We have the Wayfarer flagship brand, and then a series of 4 sister brands, All Modern, Joss & Main, Birch Lane, and our new high-end brand, Paragold. Favorite app. So I'd say one of my favorite shopping apps, other than the Sneakers app, which honestly I think is tremendous, is I'd say is the Farfetch shopping app. It's sort of a luxury clothing app that they do a tremendous job with both editorial and personalization. So on the home screen, you don't have to know what you want in mind. They're great at serving up things that sort of can surprise and delight you. So I think that's a great shopping experience. And on the utility side, I could not plug more the Trello app. If anyone doesn't use that, could not recommend it more. It's free. It's amazing.
Good morning. My name's Ron Ferris. I am the GM of a new studio for Nike called S23 NYC. It's actually 3 blocks down the road on 23rd Street. We obsess on creating mobile experiences that create emotion for sneakerheads and all Nike consumers. Prior to that, I was working, I'd founded a startup called Virgin Mega, and before that I was running marketing at Virgin Mobile. As I was kind of obsessing this idea of kids waiting in lines for concert tickets, sneakers, cronuts, everything, and there was something I really geeked out on the idea of tailgating commerce, the way you tailgate a football game or a basketball game, and the idea of bringing like-minded people together in like an ephemeral community that would allow them to express their lust for products before a product would actually drop for them in the app. And 18 months ago, we were acquired by Nike, and our team, which has grown from about 12 to 40 now, really has taken the mandate for Nike to look at digital through a new lens, not just more through an emotional lens, one to create next generation mobile experiences that can really connect with fanatical consumers. And that's kind of what we're all about. As far as apps, I'm digging. So there's this one app, so there's all, the normal ones, and I can say HQ Trivia is awesome and all that crap, but I honestly can't stand that app anymore, to be honest. It's like 3 p.m. productivity stops in my studio. But there's one app that I love, and I always find when an app can break through and create like a smile or an emotional moment for you. The app for me right now is, I don't know if anybody's heard of Invader. So it's a complete twist on graffiti and street art. There's a graffiti artist named Invader, and what he does is he will literally go all over the world, and he'll tag walls and bomb walls like any normal graffiti artist, but he has an app that will actually visually recognize, so that if you find the piece, it will unlock points for you. So he actually has a ton of users, and it was really fascinating because he creates this added hype on top of this Banksy-esque hype on his own work just by driving people through digital. So a really weird, unusual digital to physical experience that I kind of like.
I love it. It's like Pokemon meets art.
Meets art, meets Guggenheim.
Very, very cool. So thank you again for joining us. And we heard a lot about consumer behavior from peers, so thought we could start there in this concept of needing to reframe the customer relationship. So what kind of customer trends have you seen that really is helping to drive your mobile strategy?
I'd say, so we're focused on really a fanatical consumer in the sneakers app. I mean, we have a host of apps, the Nike app, the sneakers app, Nike Running and Nike Training, to cover the ecosystem of our consumer base. And it's pretty well segmented. With respect to, in my particular world of fanatical sneakerheads, we see a need. The trend we're spotting is that, and I think Piers said it really well about that idea of validating the purchase or creating that feeling of pride of purchase, and that comes through the experience of how they purchased it and what's given the attention span. And we focus on youth mostly. I mean, youth being defined as 18 to 34, but really more 18 to 24 as a sweet spot. But in those consumers, we look at how they obsess over not just the shoe that they want, the sneaker that they want, but how they got it. And from our perspective, it used to be, and it still is, where the story of the sneaker was really important to add to the mythology and folklore of the product, and that alone was enough to kind of get people to want to purchase it. Now we're finding, with 5-minute attention spans on Instagram, how you get the shoe and how you unlock the shoe in certain ways is just as compelling as the shoe itself. So that experience, which in turn becomes mythology shared around social water coolers and campfires like Instagram, becomes a place where that experience is the story. And that's something that, that's the trend that I'm actually most focused on.
Great. So on the Wayfarer side, sort of as I mentioned, a lot of the categories that folks come to us for are more highly considered and often have a bit of anxiety around ensuring that you're getting the right thing, it's going to fit in your space, what is the delivery experience going to be like? So that sort of answering those questions and helping our customer through that journey has been a lot of where we're investing our time on the mobile strategy side. So on ensuring that people are getting the right thing, obviously reviews are a huge part of that. So we invest a ton in ensuring that there's hundreds of reviews for our top sellers to make sure people really understand the quality value equation for any given product. But more specific to the mobile context is we have been investing for a number of years, largely led by sort of just initiative from one of the company's co-founders into the AR/VR space. So we have almost 100,000 of our products digitally rendered into a 3D model, which can be placed in your room on now an Android and an iOS device through augmented reality. That's also available through virtual reality, but I'm not sure a ton of people are like shopping on an Oculus currently. But for when that does occur 5 years from now, we'll be ready. And that we've seen have huge value, add a ton of value to our customer, because they can actually see the new sofa in their space, understand if the dimensions are going to fit, actually look quite closely at the texture of the product and the fabric. Because we're doing all of this in-house through an in-house team, the fidelity of the models is extremely high. So that's been one of the big sort of trends that we've tried to help answer for our customer. And then on the delivery piece, this is sort of a little more simplistic, but it's one of these things that's like, why had no one ever thought of this before? We have a lift-like map for your delivery truck. So 3 stops before your delivery is going to arrive, the map is enabled, and you can actually see the truck come to your house. So you can say, oh, do I have time to run out for 5 minutes to go, drop my kids at the park or pick something up from the store? Or it sort of alleviates that anxiety of the noon to 6 p.m. window, the cable guy is going to show up, and everyone's been in that situation. And we've tried to sort of, again, alleviate that anxiety over these highly considered purchase moments.
So it sounds like you're building trust with the consumer too, which is very important as it pertains to this ever-changing retail environment we're living in. And touching on AR, VR, because I think it's a very important topic as it pertains to building that trust, innovation, and so forth. How is it specifically for Wayfarer, since you're leading in that space definitely, what are the practical implications? Are you actually seeing it drive sales? And maybe talk about that a bit.
Yeah, so we have, as I mentioned, we've built out these models for our top sellers and adding thousands of additional ones every month. And I'd say that the two main use cases for that is one, being able to have customers see the product, as I mentioned, in their home. And we see for customers that use that feature, they convert it 4 to 5 times the rate of people that don't use the 3D view in room, as we call it. And then secondly, it allows us to actually really accelerate the testing that we have on the creative front, because we can in real time assemble different versions of different creatives. So imagine a room that we have some inclination that, Jess might be a more modern style aesthetic. So we can actually create, take the same sofa, but assemble a modern styled room in order to show that off for a given customer, depending on sort of what segment they're in. And having those 3D models enables that at a scale that you could never accomplish if you had to actually have like a physical photo studio to take all those different versions.
I'll say AR really punches above its weight in the sense that it's actually not that hard to build, but the emotional impact it has on the consumer and their way about like having that conversion at a higher rate really is 3-4x, and the impact, the long tail effect of how that consumer feels about your brand is really powerful. We've done a lot of we're now in the mode from moving from experiment to scale on AR with sneaker drops, and it's really important to kind of move away. I mean, a lot of AR that's out there is kind of very kitschy and gimmicky, and it's the dancing pickle or whatever, like it's kind of on your coffee table, but we've found a way to use it as a kind of an unlock mechanism for a shoe in very unexpected places, taking your media inventory, for example, and training a sneakers camera over it to unlock a 3D model of the shoe that's available for purchase. That instance, as it starts to, we found a lot of benefit, not just in driving sales, but over the course of 4-week cohort analyses that we've done of people who've engaged with the app using AR versus those who didn't. Those who did ended up staying and entering 30% more draws and lines for future shoes, and demand was, I think, increased by about a good another third on that stuff. So we see that like there's definitely a lot more. AR is definitely something that we feel is for the simplicity of the experience actually really creates a lot of energy for the community.
And it sounds like it's driving, again, utility, through passion points that they're interested in, which brings up, I think, apps in general. So you've got an average consumer might have, 40 to 60 apps on their phone, and, there's 24% of them are abandoning the apps. Are you seeing this drive more lifetime value, and what is kind of your staying power strategy for your apps?
So loyalty for, again, our category is a little bit unique from like a high turn thing. So loyalty for us, we know that a customer is only going to be in market, a handful of times, if that, for something for their home. So how do we stay top of mind when they're actually outside of a purchase cycle? So we've tried to create content that's going to bring people back and into their app when they have that moment where they're waiting in the bank and need like a 45-second time waster. We try and create that content that's going to allow our customers to get inspired and maybe see a bit of whimsy. So we have on the home feed, we are constantly curating a set of sort of like bizarro products, which is something that Wayfarer is sort of known for, given the breadth of our catalog. And so that can be sort of a surprise and delight moment. And then we also have a feature that we call Shop the Look, which takes content from Instagram, from our customers, from editorial, influencers, other places, and tags them with the exact Wayfarer products to allow people to shop that editorial look and actually get what can seem like a very aspirational image at their price point. And again, that can be something that you're enjoying, not necessarily in a moment of, oh, I need a new coffee table or I need a new guest bed, to allow people to stay engaged with the brand outside of those sort of specific purchase moments. We're also going to be launching a new loyalty program later this year, and sort of like TBD what that looks like in like classic Wayfarer form. It's like a little bit last minute, and we'll probably test like 8 different versions of it to see what works.
And I'd say from our perspective, I think our formula is a little different because it's more of a touch of fanatical commerce in the sense that some of these the demand for our product is really kind of driven by so much of the energy in the community and how much the products are shared around them. So from our perspective, we leverage scarcity and urgency as a way to make coming back to the app as an appointment. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's weekly active users, daily active users, we obsess those metrics to make sure that there's a shoe for that consumer that they absolutely have to come back into the app for. And the more experiences that they have, the app tools that we build are more of like, in some ways, a decoder kit for a lot of the consumers. And again, we look at the psychographics of our specifically more male consumers as thinking of them more as gamers than shoppers in how they hunt for the sneakers or chase the sneakers. And that was all derived from the sneaker game back in the 90s when analog, you'd have to call like a 1-800 number, hear a recording to go to this corner where you can go pick up an AJ1. And all we're doing is basically creating a new canvas, leveraging the canvas of tech to be able to simulate that folklore again. That's probably for the top 15% of our audience, where we, like any fanatical community, it's 15% are the more hardcore users and 85% are the more casual. And our hope and thesis is that those that engage with the app at a very, very obsessive level up here comment and speak about it on social in a way that creates discoverable moments for those in the more casual community. So if you can harmonize that, that's what we feel is like the huge unlock, is to get that community to grow, because Nike frankly does less talking and just creates the tool for the community to help move the footwear.
Love it. So building communities to help drive app loyalty as well as move them up the funnel to more branding. So we do have a room full of, for the most part, within the media industry, agency partners, buyers, sellers. So I'd love to touch a little bit on, the mobile advertising strategy world. So, I think there's a lot of retail buzzwords right now. There's a lot of mobile buzzwords right now. Give me some that you're loving and others that you wish your partners never brought you.
I'd say an easy one for me on the don't want to hear it is bid up. That anytime there's a problem with a campaign, that's always the solution. Bid up, bid up, bid up. That is like, I think that's been the solution like 1 out of 1,000 times. So if no one ever said that again, that would make me very happy.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, media starts to play a different role in a lot where it's less about awareness. And from our perspective, I look at media, the potential of what was once, out-of-home billboards and things like that, is kind of like portals into digital. And all we're trying to do is, when that blessed QR code first showed up, as ugly as that thing is, there's a great insight around the idea of bridging. That was really the first bridge of the gap between physical and digital. And all we're trying to do is get rid of that in a way that makes it harmonious to experience digital physical. So when I look at media now, I look at it very differently than when I was at Virgin Mobile as a way to like traditionally increase your awareness and engagement, but really rather now as like another way into purchase. And that's why we use, for example, augmented reality as a way to I see it as a digital pop-up shop when I see a bus shelter. So that to me is a lot more a better use, and from that perspective, it should be priced accordingly and serve different purposes. Then it just serves a different purpose now for what it could be in the future.
So with that, I think another buzzword, but one that works well, is omni-channel in retail. And so when you're thinking of mobile and bucketing your advertising budgets, is it mobile everywhere? Is it mobile budgets? How specifically do you look at that, Jess?
So I'd say we are very cognizant about pushing aggressively into mobile. It's where our customers are. It's now where they're liking to convert and shop. And so we want to be mobile first in how we're thinking about all of our tactics and strategy, including our advertising campaigns. I'd say we're probably, just to put a number out there, let's say for our advertising spend, excluding TV, it's probably somewhere 70, 80% on mobile. And we've found a big opportunity there leveraging our attribution. We have an in-house attribution model, which allows us, we think, coupled with our device graph, to actually more properly attribute mobile touch points than maybe some other partners. So we actually see a big arbitrage opportunity where mobile is too cheap for the value that you get for it. And so if you can get high quality inventory on great partners like Oath, then you actually get an outsized return for what you're getting, because we think we have a little bit of a advantage on the sort of information side.
I completely agree. I think like mobile especially via social, also punches above its weight in the sense that the value you get is commensurate. And in a world where, I mean, Nike stands in a very interesting crossroads in the sense that so much of its business was sold into wholesale for the past 45 years. Right now, we're obsessing over direct-to-consumer in a way. And so to be able to get more of those consumers on our digital grid, not necessarily, and living in harmony with selling on Foot Locker, but in a way that kind of also gets us the treasure trove of data to be able to like forecast better and all that kind of stuff. I think driving those app downloads for sneakers, Nike app, and all of our apps in the ecosystem really comes, really is handled better through a social mobile lens from our perspective. And I think that when we start to drive those installs, that's when we start to move into more performance-based marketing around that. And the shoe and the experiences really become the content of the vessel of how we kind of lure the consumers in. So now you start to play that out and think that, well, if I really am under-indexing in Miami or in certain cities, perhaps then there's, perhaps maybe our physical product can maybe tailor in such a ways to start to lure those consumers to come download the app using the product as content, which I know sounds weird, but it's a good way to kind of lure a lot of those consumers into your ecosystem using performance-based marketing tools.
And also personalization. So
For
another
sure.
big buzzword, but one that I think is very important and we're all seeing and using and it's working. So what does personalization mean for your brands and how are you embracing it? I think, Ron, you were just talking about that.
Yeah, so personalization's been a very high priority across the entire Nike digital ecosystem. And it breaks down in many different ways. One is the one-to-one relationship that can be more high touch, but kind of like that idea of one-to-one chat at scale to allow you to tailor recommendations based on the data from the consumer. But what's more important than curating to that consumer is the idea of leveraging so much of the data that you have to just be able to recognize, to signal to the consumer that you're actually recognizing them. It doesn't have to be as deep as, I think people, the word personalization, I wish I would, it's a word that I think is very specific in that, and how you have to personalize that person. But even just understanding, in our world, for example, because of the fact that demand outpaces supply, recognizing that someone hasn't been able to purchase but had an intent to purchase is almost more powerful than recognizing how many purchases they've made. And to be able to signal and recognize that piece of data and target some form and to act on that is a very powerful mechanic. So that's kind of how it plays for us.
Jess.
Yeah, and for us, we think about sort of two main prongs of personalization. One is how we're going to talk to a customer, and then the second is what is actually in that message. So we're constantly thinking through, is a push notification through the app the right place to talk to someone? Is actually a call from someone at one of our call centers the best way? Is it an email? Is it through a message on Facebook? Is it through a display ad? And so understanding what's the right channel for any given customer at any given sort of moment of their customer journey is one piece of personalization, and the second is then the content. And so in the content, we think through, again, sort of mapping against the funnel, so to speak, of sort of a customer's relationship with us, which is how do we sort of, introduce them to the brand in the strongest way? What is the element of Wayfarer's value proposition that we think is going to be most resonant with that customer? Is it talking about our great customer service? Is it talking about our selection, our value pricing, the great delivery experience you're going to have? So sort of taking, using data science, which again sounds like fancier than it needs to, but essentially segmentation of what's the right best foot forward to have with a customer, and then all the way through to the post-purchase experience. What is the next thing that we should introduce a customer to? Let's say someone bought a hot tub, which is actually hysterical that people buy hot tubs actually pretty regularly. But let's say someone bought a hot tub living in an apartment. That would not be something on my wish list. But what's the next thing? What's the next class or category that someone is most likely to purchase when they do buy something expensive for their outdoors? And so keeping them engaged with the brand and helping them through sort of understanding our catalog, introducing them to the next thing that they might like, is again sort of wraps back into allowing them to start sort of that customer journey again with us, and then personalizing along the way.
So personalization also comes into creative, right, and how you're messaging to your consumers. So how are you thinking about ad formats as it pertains to mobile? We talked about AR a bit. That can obviously be more on the consumer side, but also ad format side. How else is mobile challenged in the ad format space?
I'd say one thing for us is, this sounds very simplistic, but just like bigger is better. So if we can have a bigger unit rather than a smaller one that has motion, that's even better. One that's like in the middle of someone's field of view, like even better than that. So all of the high quality inventory on mobile, I'd say, is sort of quite paramount in the advertising being successful. And then there's things on our side which again sound quite simplistic but end up really moving the needle, which is making sure people are remembering, like, someone is looking at this probably on a smudgy screen with a bunch of bright lights around them. How do you make sure that your creative actually breaks through in that context of someone being distracted with any given different thing, and having that rich contrast, big copy, simple message? Those sorts of things are often easy to forget but end up being quite impactful.
I think, and this is funny because I'd come from a world of traditional making the 1 minute anthem and then cut downs to 30s and 15s and all that kind of stuff, and then radio generated off that. And I think where I'm at now is you start with the 3-second moment and then you build from that. Which is like a complete pivot and reversal of kind of where we were. And I think that when you start to think, this is tough because finding creative agencies that think like this are they're not there yet. Like, so many are not there yet, and they're still loyal to kind of like the pixel perfect creative that has been driving the industry for decades now. And so the ones that I gravitate towards are the ones that start with a moment that is brief as possible, leveraging things that you wouldn't feel normally, like haptics in your phone as far as part of that experience, like something that makes you touch as many senses as possible as you're going through it, through 3 to 5 seconds as the moment, and then drive that moment into a bigger story that can grow to as large as a minute. But when you start there, you start to realize that you need a different set of skills from the creative agency to be able to plan. And the media you're no longer taking the 30 second and trying to find the funniest 3 seconds to put on Instagram. You're kind of reversing the other way. And then the other thing I look for as far as the media format is, I think, being able to have run and gun production that can move at a quicker pace, and getting brands to kind of get out, brands and creative directors to kind of really not focus as much on the perfection of the creative, but really more on just the feeling. Does the feeling exist? If so, ship, and then move on to the next. And I think as you start to look at your marketing team, it's very, very different. The way I interview journalists to be storytellers before I go to like traditional copywriters, just because they're so used to just getting something out very fast and very often on that stuff. And I learned that, frankly, stolen from the playbook of BuzzFeed, which to me was one of the pioneers of a lot of the next generation native advertising models.
So
capturing attention is obviously important, but all of this isn't as important unless you are measuring and driving results. So quick, almost last question on mobile and measurement. What are the key KPIs and metrics that you're running after to make sure to prove that everything is successful and where you need it to be?
Yeah, on this, I'd say Wayfarer's invested a ton of both resources and just thoughtfulness around how to measure the effectiveness of our marketing and our advertising spend. So we have our in-house model. We're moving towards a statistical multi-touch attribution model, which is we have a beta version of that right now that we're going through and running experiments to validate. And so we feel quite confident that we have the tools to understand the efficacy of our advertising, again, to the best degree that anyone really can. And specifically for how that translates into then what are the KPIs that we look at, it's really dependent on what our goal is. So there's some advertising that we're running that's the main intention is to drive revenue tomorrow. And that's, your search, your targeting, all of that bottom of the funnel. And so our goals there are generally to be profit neutral in a pretty short window. So the advertising that we're paying for to be equivalent to the profit that we're generating from a customer, again, in a very short time horizon. That doesn't allow for all of the great stuff that builds long-term relationships with our customers. So we have different standards that we think about for different strategies and approaches. So when we're thinking about a given campaign that might be going after lapsed customers, so these are folks that haven't purchased with us in the last year, we're not going to drive a purchase from that person tomorrow. We're just trying to warm them back up to the brand. And so we think about the KPIs and our goals there quite differently.
So ours is a little different in the sense that we're, in looking after the app itself, a lot of it is about, we're still in as we're scaling globally to 18 countries in Europe, China, Japan as of 2 weeks ago. When we start to look at all the data and how we start to measure success, we're still on this, we over-index on a lot more of the organic in trying to get the download. So from that perspective, we look at K-factor and the velocity of our virals. So those that are at its dumbest, it's a metric that's like the people in the app who invite new users into the app and what that ratio is on that. And that's something that I think that we're honestly not as, I wouldn't say we're as, it's pretty rudimentary right now in the sense that we're still working with just those basics as opposed to true K-factor that, say, a mobile gaming company would work with. And then obviously the engagement in the app starts to really flourish in making sure that our daily active users and monthly active users. From a media perspective, when we do spend, a lot of it is about that attribution and really looking at the cycle of how long it takes someone to drive them down into the funnel for their first purchase. And then lately, the one we're doing is trying to for those, depending on our different segments of users, there's some segments of users that we feel have been, should be purchasing more. So it's about getting their second or third purchase in a given 6 months. That's one, but it depends. For those that are new users coming from different communities, it's really about the speed with which we get to their first purchase on that stuff.
Very helpful. So we have time for one last question, and then we will open it up to Q&A. So I think we discussed mobile's complicated, it's fun, it's innovative, it's personalized. There's lots of buzzwords, lots of very useful ones that we're all leaning into. But as you think about your media partners, this is a little bit of a selfish question. What is one thing you wish that we as your media partners did more of to help you drive that winning mobile strategy? Jess?
Yeah.
Ron was thinking.
Again, for Wayfarer, we spend a lot on advertising. How we decide where to spend is where we can think we have pretty high confidence in the return that we're getting from that marketing. And typically that means having transparency into when we're running, who we're showing against. The more data and transparency that we can get means that's where the dollars are going to flow towards. So partners that have taken a closed, walled garden approach that don't actually give you a view into where your marketing is being spent and who you're talking to, it's much harder to justify spending more than with partners that are fully transparent.
I think from our perspective, I think I like the idea of a media partner that understands the psychographic of the different communities of all the different media properties, because from our perspective, there's a lot of shared DNA, as we've seen when we start to lure people from one fanatical community to our fanatical community, because there's that feeling of over-indexing on scarcity and urgency as a good thing. So I'm less about reach and impressing us with the scale of reach, and really more about understanding the different pockets of tribes out there and finding alignments among those tribes to be able to target going deeper. So deeper for me as opposed to broader, and those that kind of are super sophisticated with models and how they can do that really, I find more attractive.
Awesome, notes taken. So we have time to open it up for Q&A. Yeah, absolutely, and I'd love to make sure you have a mic so everyone can hear. We've got one gentleman over here.
Thanks a lot. Great panel. And David Kaplan with Geomarketing. Was wondering if you could talk about, obviously, Wayfarer, Nike, very visual brands, but with the emergence of voice activation, Alexa, OK Google, Siri, on and on. How do you think about how that can be used for, as I said, for two obviously visual brands?
Yeah, I'd say the very tactical thing that Wayfarer has done is adjusting our SEO strategy to make sure that we're incorporating voice searches. So how one searches for, a good sofa is very different if they're going to do that by talking to Alexa or talking into their phone versus typing it, just the sort of etymology of how they make that phrase. So I'd say the most immediate shift that we have taken into account is by changing our SEO strategy to take that into account. Like, is anyone going to order a new lamp from Wayfarer over or not an Alexa device, over like a Google device? Who knows? Maybe. But at least we're not building towards that future right now.
I think our experiments are more about, in addition to SEO, are looking at Alexa and voice platforms for appointment making, in the sense of that. And I think for specific times of drops, 10 a.m. on a Saturday for a sneaker drop, putting that reminder in is a pretty important moment. We're also looking at chat platforms for that, like the likes of a Messenger and anywhere around that, to be able to look and explore that. All still an experimental phase, but appointments for us seem to be something that anything that can help get to address an urgent need. And I think voice is actually something that could be pretty compelling for that.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Hi, Tony Vitelli from Star Media.
Thank you.
My question is more so for Jess. Ron was talking about out of home and its ability to be kind of a digital pop-up shop. I was wondering, since you said the bigger the better, being in people's line of view, is out of home or digital out of home any part of your media mix, or do you push money there?
Yeah, so TV has been a core part of our brand building strategy since day one. I think we've tested into some out of home many moons ago, but is something that we're revisiting starting this year. We're also going to be opening a retail experience. Exactly what that looks like, probably similar to the loyalty program. We'll figure it out when we get there, and test a few different things. So bridging that into the offline world is something we're for sure thinking more about. And exactly, again, the execution, it's very unlikely to be a Wayfarer Superstore, but is it some interesting experience that leverages our AR, VR, and maybe showcases some of our core products that having the look and feel is more valuable? That's probably along the lines of what we would pursue.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Hi, Rusty Gundrum with Oath, and obviously location is a very unique thing for mobile, so just kind of curious for your take on like how you're using location data in real time or retargeting or conquesting, and any best practices you guys have there. We love location data. I mean, not in a creepy way, but like not to know where people are, but we love the idea of, frankly, making the shopping less solitary by bringing people together in physical spaces. So we launched a feature, I think about 9 months ago, called Stash, where we
it's kind of our version of Pokemon Go, where we digitally bury a lot of our releases out in the wild at Washington Square Park or certain places. And it's kind of our way of also having the community come together in certain places to celebrate purchasing and transacting in a unique way. As we're learning a lot about where people are and driving them to kind of more of these, like another version of a digital pop-up, if you will, it's starting to trigger for us those locations and the engagement in the app that they do in those locations to start moving further upstream in the chain, to start looking at how we would actually look at designing footwear and making footwear based on where those locations are. So thinking of like a new twist on hyper-local to be able to target around those people. It's been a really successful feature that we've rolled out globally, and it starts to really show you, it starts to visualize the community in certain places, which in turn becomes content that you can put into the feed to show the millions of users of what's happening and how the community is getting together. So it's a very high impact energy way of creating that. And our goal now is to find the right media moments to be able to share what's happening in pockets of hyperlocal communities.
Yes.
It's not very interesting what we do,
No worries. We can
particularly compared to that.
any other questions?
Hi, good morning. Kenneth Watson with C-Sense. So quick question, how are you working with your IT departments? Historically, IT and marketing were very separate. More and more that's becoming one, and marketers have to be able to figure out and understand technology more than ever. How are you working within your organizations to bridge that gap?
So this is a very special question you're asking, because I think that, again, before this retail apocalypse, whatever you want to call it, like whatever word everyone's going to brand, marketing and tech were in different places. I think now you'll start to see the acquisition of our company was actually a move to kind of say we need a technology group that sits at the heart of these marketing experiences to start to build it. And I think when you start to see that our team, we have our own engineering team for front end, back end, iOS, Android, that are trialing and scaling these experiences. And the marketing org of the future, the marketing tech is probably the most important part. I would say, I would argue, on par with your creative director, to make sure that you're able to understand the canvas of how you're going to tell these stories. Because right now you've got, through Instagram and all the different portals, there's just such a short window for you to get someone's attention. And you're going to have to try to move further than the like button, the comment thread, to be able to really, or the community manager, to build and iterate experiences that create the same feeling as throwing a music festival. And that's really, really hard. But if you can figure it out, you're creating that feeling at scale, as opposed to the amount of money that goes into an incredible branded music festival. That's kind of like once a year at best for a very specific amount of people. But if you can create that same emotion using tech and engagement, and that means understanding that canvas of, like I said before, haptics, visual, audio, all that element in a screen that's mobile, it takes a very specific skill set. And that's the number one thing I would tell anyone in the C-suite as they start to invest in marketing, is to really re-engineer and revisit the roles you have, because you're going to have 10 roles that have never existed in your group before, that are absolutely necessary to build the marketing org of the future.
Yeah, couldn't agree with that more. I'd say Wayfarer is extremely spoiled in our marketing team. We probably have 50 engineers that are dedicated purely to our advertising and marketing tech platforms, and their roadmaps and work are directed, based on what the marketers need. So we're extremely spoiled in that way.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Kate Allen. I'm from Pinterest, and thank you guys all for being here and for this conversation. So I'm going to bring up the kind of like the elephant in the room. Given the current climate around data privacy, especially the news last week, how do you expect your strategy to change around personalization?
Yeah, I'd say data privacy and the compact that we have with our customer has always been extremely critical to Wayfarer. Again, we're a little bit lucky in that we don't have to go through an agency. We're not, selling on another platform. All of the data around our customer touch points are all held within the four walls of our building, which makes things a little easier for us to ensure that data is being handled in the way that is critical for our business and to have that trust with our customer. And it's also been something we've been pushing our platform partners, including Facebook, on to make sure that they are treating our customers' data in the same way that we do. So, critical. You see that any of these brands, Target, Neiman Marcus, there's like a new one that comes out every quarter that has data that gets leaked, and it is hugely impactful for the long-term relationships that they have with their customers. So you have to take that very critically.
Yeah, data privacy is quite a priority that we've been auditing our own data privacy methods and all the regulatory requirements or something far before anything had gone on and what's in the press these days. I think it's always been kind of a layer of a way that we've kind of have that distance a little bit. When we look at how we target, obviously working with the right opt-in mechanics and making sure that everything's kind of up and up. I don't know where it's all going to head from where we are right now, but I do know that we have a very aggressive in our regulatory, legal, and privacy group that we meet with pretty regularly about that stuff.
Thank you.